Part 1, Chapter 12. If Dissolute. I was awoken the next morning by the sound of rain hitting the windows. Laying on my back, my right eye peeled open and was met by the spinning fan blades above. The circulatory motion stole my reallocating mind and occupied it as my body became more aware of its own existence. With a creak in my back, I sat up. It was then that I noticed something roll off me and onto the floor. One eye half open, the other closed, I peered at it skeptically. A small brown throw blanket lay in a clump at my feet. Both eyes opened, and I took a few seconds to stitch together what I could vaguely remember. It occurred to me that my dad, feeling a stroke of pity or compassion, actually gave me a blanket either in the middle of the night or on his way out this morning. I took hold of the soft fabric in both hands and pulled it up to my face. Taking in the surprisingly clean scent, I got up from the couch, folded the blanket, and lay it over the top of the headrest. I stretched as tall and wide as I could, letting the pressure escape my joints and muscles. It's Sunday, and he'll be gone at work all day. The first thing I did was open the living room window and let the dulcet smattering of rain enter. But that wasn't enough. I marched lazily to the front door and opened it wide, embracing the chilling, heavy air. I stepped out onto the porch in my socks, ears deafened by the crashing noise and eyes tracking every tiny bead as it hurtled to join the conglomerate. White noise. I could sit here for hours, just listening. There was something about bleak weather that sparked inspiration and charged my bones. It was like nothing existed outside of the blurry trees and constant barrage of noise. Nothing apart from me and my thoughts, which, incidentally, is exactly what I was trying to avoid. The next thing I knew, I was walking down the steps. It took all of 4 seconds to completely soak me through. The humid cold lathered my skin and penetrated to flesh, chilling me incredibly fast. I smiled with my hair now flat and sticking to my face. I was standing just outside the coverage of the porch, soft feet halfway sucked into the soggy dirt, and my eyes eased shut. I focused as hard as I could on every wet impact, each and every dot and its rippling effect. I could almost see them in my head, colored splashes assaulting me in gentle slow motion, patient and commiserating. Early morning emotions started to well, but were soothed by the plummeting cold. A harsh shiver ran up my spine, and I giggled out loud, opening my eyes. The world was still there, much of its palette stolen by the scrolling gray clouds and appearing to me as a two-dimensional painting behind a sprinkler. I stepped back until my heel hit the step, and then I turned around, shaking off like a wet dog and rattling my brain in my skull. I tilted to the side and caught myself. Cold, I re-entered the house and dashed across the living room to the master bathroom around the corner. I hastily stole a large towel and stripped down to nothing, making sure to avoid my image in the vanity mirror. With a bundle of wet clothes under my arm and the towel wrapped around my torso, I ascended the steps and leaned into my bathroom door, lobbing the bundle into the tub and tiptoed down the hall again into my room. I spent a few minutes quietly drying myself off, debating on whether it was worth it or not. By the time I was mostly dry and dressed for the day, I determined it was absolutely liberating and I was half tempted to do it again. Now completely awake and feeling somewhat revitalized, I skipped down the stairs and entered the kitchen for food. I found the cereal he allowed me to pick out and poured a bowl, playing a tune in my head to keep my brain stirring. The box of fruity cereal was also open, meaning he snagged a bite on his way out. Good. I leaned up against the counter by the fridge and ate it right there, just letting my eyes wander around the living room. Mouth half full, I spoke. I should probably clean up a little bit. Chewing on the clusters of granola, I glanced at the clock on the stove beside me and nearly choked when I saw the time. Holy crap, 10:40? Can't believe I slept so fucking long. I blinked, mentally snagged by my phrasing. Maybe Tansu's right. I swear a lot. I had an epitome of time wasted, and suddenly the prospect of cleaning the house somewhat was justified redemption. I quickly shoveled the rest of the cereal down and went to place the bowl in the sink when I saw the small pile. It was obvious that these dishes wouldn't get done for another few days unless I did them now, So I pulled the dish soap close, removed everything from the sink, and set them on the counter. We didn't have a plug for the sink, so I ran to the bathroom and snatched a small, old washcloth and a towel. I compacted the small one into a ball as much as I could and used it as a plug to keep water from draining so fast, and laid the towel on the right side of the counter. When the left sink was full of soapy hot water, I submerged a few bowls and plates, giving them about 5 or so minutes to soak before I pulled them out one at a time and washed them, using the right sink as a rinse station and the towel for them to dry. I'm no stranger to a pile of dishes, and I could handle them fairly easily. The only thing that always proved difficult, and I saved for last, was the silverware. I hated silverware. Still, I took extra care to make sure each fork prong was spotless, and the plates had absolutely no soapy residue. All in all, it took me an hour of practiced perfection until I drained the sink. With ugly, pruned fingers and one chore out of the way, I silently deliberated my next task. Schoolwork. Might as well get a jump on that with this leftover momentum. I wasted no time getting my bag and spreading out my papers on the coffee table. I found it much easier to concentrate now that my back didn't hurt from the awkward crisscross position on my bed. My assignments were as followed: read a total of 5 chapters in various textbooks, complete 2 separate worksheets, and write a short essay for English literature. With this setup, I was able to get my work done in just shy of 2.5 hours, plugging away with few distractions and the drive of duty. I wrapped up school stuff with the essay, since it would take the most effort. But it wasn't as bad as I predicted, and by the time the last sentence was written, I felt the fumes of my brain sputter on empty. Satisfied, I packed up all of my stuff and carried my weighted bag to the front door, leaving it by my shoes for the next morning. I walked back to the center of the room and checked the time. It was almost 1 o'clock now. As my mind often does, it began to wander, and with it, my body followed. Random thoughts sporadically appeared in my mind and just as quickly changed the subject as I paced about the house. My feet carried me to each random hung picture on the wall, all of which were from yard sales or thrift shops. Flowers, mountains, cars, anything to give this place a tiny bit of personality, and all hung at the intersecting hallway. I inspected every piece of furniture, noting the tears on the couch and scuffs on the coffee table. The end table caught my eye, and I lingered on the corner that chipped my face. My hand gradually caressed the gauze, and a twisted crunch hindered my stomach. I disconnected and started picking up things off the floor. Discarded items like pen caps and sections of the newspaper, various whatevers, and a lot of pasta noodles around the base of the oven. Everything was collected and thrown away properly. I started making noises with my lips and humming quietly. I then realized I could have the TV on, but decided not to interrupt the pathway of my thoughts. Something about today, I just didn't want to hear anything apart from the rain. I eventually found myself standing in front of his bedroom door directly beneath mine. The door was cracked open slightly, and I couldn't help but feel curious. Coy, I poked a flat spot near the middle, and it opened a small amount. All of the random thoughts I had converged into a ball of wonder. With a full hand on the wood, the door opened the rest of the way, and I entered slowly. Everything looked the same as the last time I was in here. The bed is straight ahead beneath one window, the dresser and large mirror were on the left, and the closet was on the right. His room was barren, devoid of all personality. I wondered what it was like with my mom around, if it had any sort of uniqueness that made it comfortable for them. I moved toward the dresser and began to snoop, not searching for anything in particular, just satisfying an inkling. The mounted mirror hardly reflected my image due to the grime and dust smeared all over it. I tugged on the drawer handles and saw a glimpse of random fabric in the gap. Everything appeared to be only clothing, so I didn't investigate further than a peek. On top of the surface was a rolled pair of socks, an incense burner, a crumpled pack of cigarettes, and some loose change. Nothing of interest. I moved on over to his closet in the right corner and opened the door. There was a pull string hanging down for the light. I pulled it, and it barely crooned to life. I saw a few shirts hung up, and his laundry basket stuffed in the corner, completely full and smelling like sweat and fast food. There were a couple of boxes on the floor. Inside the first small box was a bunch of papers. Looks like tax information mostly. Beneath that one was a box full of a few cables, a remote, a Bible, and a pocket watch. The last box on the very bottom was by far the most interesting. At first, it seemed to be just a box full of seasonal clothes, but as I dug through them, I came to the stifling realization that these were my mom's. My hands began to tremble as I pulled out a red V-neck, and I imagined what I could of her wearing it, then brought it to my face to take in the scent. To my dismay, the clothes had no unique smell, just an old box in the corner of his closet, tainted by years past, forgotten. Maybe I'll ask him soon about her clothes. He might let me have some. After that, I returned everything to where it belonged and shut the closet door. I lumbered over to his bed, but didn't see much in the immediate area to hold my interest. I checked underneath it, but only found a large dead spider, more clothes, and the front page of a calendar from the year 1985. It seemed to have no clear significance, just old trash. Standing up again, I sighed loudly as there was nothing in his room or this whole house to keep me occupied. Or so I thought. Next to the bed was his nightstand. Spread out on top was more change, a coffee mug, a screwdriver, and a lamp, of course. The nightstand housed one small drawer and stood on long, wobbly legs. I grabbed the tiny knob and slid the drawer open, revealing its contents. As soon as I laid my eyes on what was in the drawer, my brain swelled with cynical ideology. Innocently laying on its side was my dad's handgun. He's rambled on and on about it during drunken stupors whenever he has a buddy from work come over. People I didn't know or trust, so I often stayed in my room and just listened to their grumbling. He bragged about his Smith & Wesson 38 and how he once killed a monster with it. They laughed, and I was left to wonder if he even owned a gun or if he just made it up to sound cool. Fixated on the weapon, I swallowed hard and removed it from the drawer. It's heavy, I thought. The weight of the gun was dense, concentrated in the center where it housed the loaded bullets. My finger aligned with the trigger, resting delicately on the curved steel and clenching slightly for stability. The barrel wobbled with my shifting grip, and I imagined what it would be like to fire it. I'd never held a gun before, so I fidgeted with it until the chamber popped open and a couple of bullets fell to the floor. Oh shit, I swore and quickly bent down to retrieve them. The large rounds lodged into the carpet and were easy to retrieve. One by one, I slotted them the right way into the empty cylinder and then snapped it shut. I held it on its side and really looked at it, wondering just how many times it had been fired in its life and why. The longer I stared, the more it became clear to me just what I was holding in my hand. This small, seemingly insignificant contraption of metal could steal a person's life instantly. All you have to do is aim and pull the trigger. I held the gun with two hands, one properly with my finger through the guard and the other wrapped tightly around the first hand, supporting the weight. I raised them both and held it straight out, locking my elbows. The back and front sights were aligned almost perfectly, and I held it there. The blurry shape opposite of me was my reflection in the dirty mirror. My arms lowered slightly, then raised again, more stiff. With my finger on the trigger, I paused to really consider what it would be like to have someone on the other end of this gun. The power I'd have over them. The ability to determine their fate, live or die. I stared down the barrel aimed at my own smudged face, and my hands began to violently shake. I could smell something foul curling around the room. My breaths reverberated tenderly in my head, and a sudden, weighted, layered feeling subsumed me. Through the dust and grime of the mirror, my own reflection began to morph, taking a completely different shape. The shape of my dad. I winced, static ice in my brain. Imagination or a vision, it didn't matter to me at that moment. I was hard focused on the new target, ignoring the changing elements of the room around me. The air became heavy and hot, bringing sweat to my brow and stealing my breath. A loud, constant clicking vibration could be heard in the walls, echoing. My intent did not sway. My posture remained. Then I felt a surge of energy in my chest, one that shot outward and followed along both arms into my fingers, itching to tighten up. Boiling energy pulsated in my veins as the pressure around me completely changed again. Losing all color and becoming electrically charged, I felt nothing but angst and fire take hold. Gripping the gun in my hand, holding this much power caused a sickness, a desire to wreak vengeance. Without my own command, I began to speak out loud. My voice was harsh and sharp, like an inner demon using my body as a conduit for expression. Who cares if he had one good day? Who cares if he held me once? He's a selfish dick without any regard for anyone but himself. He deserves to die. They deserve to die. A frantic breath seized my lungs. The hot moisture erupted from my mouth with every intake and exhale. Suddenly, a controlling headache took hold of me, and my eyes slammed shut. My body swayed for a moment, and my hold on the gun weakened. When I opened my eyes and stared along the barrel, I could see someone else standing there. It wasn't my dad. It was him. The old man was there in the glass, overcast by shadows. My chest exploded in panic, and my hands reacted with raw instinct. The finger which tightly wrapped around the trigger forcefully tightened. It seemed that everything around me began to play in slow motion through my eyes. As I watched the hammer release and slam against the gun, the cylinder cycled once, and I was left shaking in absolute silence. My eyes had forced themselves shut, bracing for the noise, but it never came. When they opened again, the mirror was reflecting only my image. There never was anyone else. I redirected the gun and pulled my arms back, holding it delicately in my hand, terrified of it. Ensuring sensitivity, I turned it slightly and popped the chamber open again. All the rounds were there, except for one empty slot. My lips trembled, and a bead of sweat rolled down my face, soaking into the bandage. I set the gun on the bed, making sure to treat it with respect, and got down on the floor. Just beneath the bed, hidden under its shadow, was the stray bullet that I thankfully missed. I snatched it up and held it in my palm. Examining it closely, I discovered an oddity with the shell. A wrinkle in the metal where the tip was planted in the shell. It was an imperfect distinction between it and the others. Carefully, I returned it to the gun and then placed it in the drawer. Letting out a sigh of relief, I sat on the edge of the bed, nursing my headache. What's happening to me? I asked myself, rubbing my temples. As I rubbed, I noticed an aching pain in my muscles. My shoulders and back, forearms were completely stiff as though I had just done a day-long handstand. I straightened out my back, trying to crack it when I noticed something odd in my peripheral vision. The window to my left, above his bed, was black. The sun had completely set. The hell? I jumped up in confusion. It only now became apparent that the room I stood in was completely dark, outside of a small guiding light plugged into an outlet near the door. My brain spun as I tried to make sense of this. It was only the afternoon when I came in here. It can't be dark already. That's impossible. A sinking fear interrupted my thought process. I turned around and looked right out of his door into the living room. The entire house was shrouded in darkness. I swallowed hard. Fuck, I whispered. All of my senses went into overdrive. I could taste the stale saliva under my tongue. I could hear the creaking of the house and scraping branches outside, and I could see the burn in my muscles and my skin. The smell of whatever settled in his carpet mixed with my own bodily odor, and even in this darkness, I could draw outlines of everything around me. Standing by the lamp, I pulled the string, but it didn't turn on. I pulled it again and crept towards the open door to flick the switch. Light and color filled the room, and I felt a little less vulnerable. At least I knew the power wasn't out. I switched it off again and slipped out into the hallway, using memory and my adapted vision to reach the stairs. However, at the base of the first step, I stopped. The only thought in my head was the overhead railing and what could possibly be standing there. 1 step, then 2, a loud creak, then 3. I stopped and retreated a step. Quickly changing my mind, I returned to the living room and turned on a few different lights. I glanced up at the balcony and saw nothing there. Cautious, I didn't know what time he'd be home, but I decided I didn't want to be isolated in my room for the rest of the night. As comfortable as it was, it also felt like I was put in a corner. No means of escape if needed. I turned on the TV, lowered the volume, and curled up in a blanket again, ignoring the acid in my belly and sinking deep into the old cushions. A nature documentary played, but I hardly absorbed the narration. For now, my mind circled around one thing in particular: that single bullet that escaped my grasp.